So hello and welcome to our webinar, Collaborate to Innovate, Key Trends for Public Procurement in 2024. Today's webinar is being brought to you courtesy of EUNA Solutions and is being presented by Jimmy Quach. If anytime during the webinar you need some tech support, please send me, my name is Jeff, a direct message, and I'll be able to help you with any technical issues. It's often asked, is this meeting being recorded? Will the PowerPoint be sent out? You should have received that email with the PowerPoint this morning from Justin Deering at NIGP. And yes, the recording will be sent out later this afternoon. Again, if you need any technical assistance, my name is Jeff. Let me know in the chat. Otherwise, keep the chat selected to everyone, and everyone will see your questions and comments, and we will do our best to answer those throughout the presentation. If you want to make sure that we see your questions, add those to the Q&A box, and we won't lose those in chat, and we'll answer those at the end of today's presentation. Jimmy, would you like to get started?
Yes, I will. So thank you for that introduction, Jeff, and I think we can get on started there. Awesome. So good morning, everybody, and good afternoon for anyone tuning in today. Thanks for taking your time to come to today's webinar. So again, as our lovely facilitator, Jeff from NIGP, has preluded, welcome to today's webinar. So I'm happy to host y'all. My name is Jimmy from Bonfire. I'm a solutions engineer at EUNA for our procurement branch, representing some of our products like Bonfire Procurement. And really today, the whole point of this webinar is to really be able to talk about what we're looking at our slide today right now. So collaborate to innovate, key trends for public procurement in 2024. So what do we mean by that slide here? And as we go into this, we're going to essentially be covering a few key parts of our topic here. So we're going to be covering things, for example, like procurement capacity and workforce challenges that we've been seeing over this year in public procurement, how teams are leveraging innovation in times of a bit of uncertainty or change, if you will, in the last few years. And of course, like how is everyone that we've surveyed and talked to realizing strategic outcomes and then leveraging their community and network to be able to be more up to date and get better value procurement and be just more digitized and connected as they're going about their day to day here. So you might be wondering, like where's this data all coming from? As you can see from the beginning of the slide here, state of public procurement, what is that? So for folks who might or might not know, for many years previously, some of you folks might understand or be familiar with something called the State of Public Sourcing Report. That was created for many years by Bonfire Interactive. And now we've gone ahead and grown into a more broader company for unit procurement, where we're now partnering with other broader solutions that holistically serve more functionality within procurement end to end. But also we have like sister agencies and products now that cover like budgeting, grants, and that kind of stuff. So for many years, Bonfire used to basically send out this annual survey called State of Public Sourcing. And the last year's report, 2023, essentially dove into a hopeful outlook, for the future of public sourcing and public procurement, and the factors that are propelling all of us forward in the industry and in our careers. This year we actually want to take a bit more of a broader approach, and the reason why is, in the last year, EUNA has essentially broadened our procurement horizons, where now we're essentially introducing and working with much more broader and holistic purpose-built solutions, where now not only do we cover, for example, like sourcing and contract management software, we now also like cover the intake, the PO and invoicing, and also marketplace purchasing with our partnership with Equal Level. So because of that, because we've been partnering with more and more folks and our team has been growing, we've been able to tap into a much more broader lens and insights, if you will, with the folks who we work with and the data that we can pull from our systems. So now in this report, essentially, for this report, it's now branded as the Public Procurement Report. We've gathered surveys from over 100 participants, along with our clients, along with insights from government and other industry sources, as well as other data that's being pulled anonymously from a bunch of our procurement solution systems at EUNA. So with that, we actually thought that with the new report for this year, we'd be able to essentially, as you can see from the agenda earlier, walk through some of these key trends that we've been seeing that has been coming up a bit more often for our folks that we've been talking to in the space of public procurement. So going into the first part here, and we're going to be going into something on the topic of capacity and workforce. So of course, your mileage may vary. But we've been hearing essentially from a lot of teams in the last few years that sometimes there could feel like a lot of departments, this isn't just in procurement, it can just depend on like your specific agency. But sometimes some teams and departments feel very siloed, where sometimes some teams might feel disconnected from other agencies and departments, or they might be feeling isolated, where, for example, all of the brunt of procurement and purchasing is solely on, for example, the procurement and purchasing teams themselves. But they're also, a lot of their work is by nature really collaborative and really affects other different departments and divisions at your agency. Because at the end of the day, we all know that procurement is a very important function for an organization. It's the way that strategic spend flows through and out from the organization. So, with the topic of capacity and workforce, I've done a few of these webinars now and presentations, and we've surveyed some folks in past calls, and even from this report too. We've been hearing that in the last few years or so, retaining and attracting talent has been a bit of a challenge. We've been seeing rising demand in that topic to be talked about, and now, a lot of teams are having to deal with some rising rates of turnover or churn, and so attracting talent is getting a little bit like tougher, if you will. And you can see from this data where that might be coming from as well, and duplicity from the other side. So our data essentially shows that a lot of users in our systems that are branded like EUNA solution systems, the amount of projects have been increasing quite quickly, that a lot of folks are running in our systems, but not so much against the number of users that are growing in our system. So essentially, a lot more folks are having to deal with a lot more work, but either with like a same amount, slightly growing or slightly shrinking team. So clearly, we've heard from our surveys and from the data that a lot of teams and staff need more staff, but sometimes simply, adding people isn't always enough. It's really vital for leaders essentially to be able to better equip their teams to handle growing workloads, but also to be able to work smarter and more effectively, and making sure we can say like, hey, how can we be more effective, efficient, and find ways where we can be more smarter in our approach. And so some of these top initiatives that we're seeing this year essentially reflect that. So again, it's about staffing, process improvement, but while staying compliant while trying to find efficiencies. And there's just a quick little tidbit that I can add to the chart here, but essentially what we've actually gathered in comparison from this year to last year is last year we asked our folks in our survey, do you how much are you feeling with regards to your ability to manage your current volume of projects? Last year's survey, 46% of them felt neutral or less confident. So 46% felt neutral or less confident last year in their ability to handle their workload. Now that's up to around 55, 60%. So we can see, for example, even just from this year alone, especially as we go into like the elections this fall, there's just a lot of uncertainty while everyone's trying to navigate, your day to day while essentially trying to do more with less. So essentially, on the slide here, a lot of staffing and the ability to enable your staff hinges on technology, your solutions, and your tools, and your processes. So, teams in public procurement are facing growing workloads. We've seen that from a few slides previously. And this constant cycle essentially leads to, some burnout for some folks, voiced by some folks, maybe some staff turnover at certain agencies. And there's also a lot of strain in operations too. And that just leaves more stress on remaining employees and staff. So this isn't a new problem, as I mentioned in the stats earlier, about like 50 to 60% of procurement leaders are seeing that like they're struggling with their current workloads. But replacing staff isn't just a matter of HR budget. It also puts a large strain on current team members, who have to train new hires, and you have to think about all the change management ramping up that goes on with that. So with that, according to a study from Salesforce, essentially employees have essentially been seen to be unhappy with their workplace technology. If they are so, they're more than twice as likely to feel burned out and plan to leave within a year. So really what we're seeing in our survey responses in our report this year is there's a lot more conversation and a lot more headwind and, for example, interest in trying to see how can we explore technology or purpose-built solutions to either completely digitize a process or at least augment different parts of our process to make it a bit more manageable for our workloads today, for our teams that we're trying to manage, as we're trying to manage to do essentially more with less. So with that, we kind of set the foundation here. We're seeing some challenges coming into 2024 and onwards, but we'd actually love to get essentially your view and your experience today. What's going on with your team right now? So essentially we have a poll here that Jeff will help me facilitate with folks on the call here. And we essentially want to ask you, right now off the top of your head, what's your top internal challenges? Some of the options could be like ensuring compliance. Are they like dealing with and trying to fix complex processes, lack of staff resources, managing budget, technology resources, lack of qualified suppliers or vendors, others, or conflicts of interest. So Jeff will go ahead and launch the polls there. And then once we have some results, we'll go ahead and discuss the results.
That poll has been launched, and 50% of us have completed it already. We'll take another 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 5. 4, 3, 2, 1. And we are ending the poll. I'm saying it slowly because I know someone was just about to click submit. There they are. And here are the results.
Now, Jeff, I'm actually not able to see on my screen. It might be because I'm in presenter mode, but I'm not actually able to see the poll results. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love if you could actually read out some of the maybe percentage results, and then I can just basically talk about my thoughts from there.
Yeah, the top two are literally the top two that are on the list. Complex processes has 28%, ensuring compliance is 22%. It continues down the list. Lack of staffing resources at 17%. And then there's smaller numbers for the rest of them.
That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. And thank you so much, everybody, for on the call for filling in that poll. I think those are very interesting results because, as you might know, for example, when you look at the broad gambit of like where the era and like the processes have gone and transformed and evolved over the years in the space of like public sector in general, there's been a lot of essentially change, and a lot of, for example, different agencies and folks on the call today who might be coming from organizations and teams that use different combinations of leverage technology, or sometimes maybe none at all. We do have some folks today who are still doing like the old classic, for example, especially in procurement, pen and paper or paper and pencil. But of course, you have to understand that, when I'm thinking about those results, where my mind immediately goes to is a lot of these digital transformations that a lot of teams have gone through for their systems and for their governments, that's happened decades ago. And so I think it's actually very telling from what I've heard from other teams as well, where now a lot of teams are trying to work a lot more smarter, a lot more faster, but they're having to wrestle with, if you will, to use those words, dependencies, processes in their IT systems that were just antiquated and might have been built out like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or more. And so I can see, for example, the need for like to be able to make more efficient those complex processes. And especially the ensuring compliance as well. We've also seen that especially play in the last few years. Like the first time the COVID-19 pandemic kind of made its way onto the scene. That's been a good handful of years now from now, but we've also been hearing that a lot of teams are, having a hard time. There's so much free money out there with regards to like grant funding that filters down from the federal level down to the state and then local government level. And there's a lot of like gotchas or a lot of catches to be able to capture those compliances and capture those, for example, spend. So we can see, for example, if, for example, from our reports, we're seeing that folks are managing or struggling with staff shortages, having to deal with, for example, complex processes and ensuring compliance just makes it for a bit more of a frustrating challenge to deal with on a regular basis. So with that in mind, actually, again, I appreciate everyone's input there. And throughout today's presentation, I'll try and make sure that like what we cover today really covers or ties back to some of those leading poll results. But essentially, we've kind of gotten the taste of what some of the folks are going through today, either on this call or through our industry report here. And so let's try and talk about like some of the ways we can bridge that gap. So of course, one of the topics that has been coming about in our reports and our surveys this year from our report, essentially one of the ways that some teams are bridging that gap essentially is through balancing technology, process, and staffing needs. So exploring these factors, of course, directly affects procurement staff. There are ways you can obviously explore solutions if you don't have any today that can directly help lift the legwork to be able to run your procurements in a less manual fashion or less paper fashion. But of course, beyond that, your mileage may vary. Teams differ in this response, but remote work as well has also actually been a highly desired and voiced concern or priority for those staff who have actually been churning. So, data has shown that offering more remote work makes it a lot easier to attract staff. So a lot of teams these days are looking to be able to see, for example, how can we work with our IT or our CTO or CIO to make sure that we can explore digital solutions to give our teams more flexible ways to work together in procurement. And even some of the stats I have here, 98% of workers desire to work remotely at least some of the time, if not all the time. 44% of fully remote businesses find it easier to recruit staff, so that's very interesting. These are really good metrics to know. And of course, 32% of those agencies are also requiring full-time office presence. So it's very interesting to see that from some of these like results that we've been seeing in the industries, a lot more folks who are looking to look for new jobs at different companies and like experiencing this turn, a lot of folks these days are looking for a hybrid or fully remote work. Of course, it's not very easy to be able to do that. It's easier said than done. Some folks, your mileage may vary because, for example, maybe there's a culture at the office or a policy where you're demanding or asking for staff to come in either like part-time or like fully full-time. But there is one more caveat, for remote work to function properly, both staff and processes require better internal collaboration. Because as teams work better together, they're less frustrated and more productive, and then in turn downstream, that just leads to better compliant, effective engagement in their work and better value procurement. So that's one way, balancing technology. Another way as well is to be able to increase that collaboration through these solutions. So, collaboration, again, as mentioned earlier, leads to better productivity, and engagement leads to better savings. In fact, 70% of employees believe that better collaboration can have a positive impact on employee productivity and time savings. And 21% from a report say that overall savings has come from just higher team engagement overall. So ensuring that staff on your teams have buy-in into your chosen software solutions can really help make sure that you're getting the best value engagement and involvement with your team and the solutions that you're trying to bring into play. So honestly, when we're looking at this downstream, if we're trying to move towards a more engaged and efficient and effective workplace, a lot of that can require purpose. And what do we mean by that? So when we talk about that, one major point is purpose-driven employees typically perform 33% better. They show 75% higher commitment and are 49% less likely to leave their positions. So when recruiting, this has been not just recommendations that we've seen from our reports, but we've seen these recommendations from winning teams in public procurement that are, striving and not having to deal with these kind of staff shortages themselves. But we've seen other teams also recommend that when recruiting, emphasize meaningful work over traditional benefits like stability and job security, focusing on how their work can really impact the community and broader society through procurement, and where you can have technology and procurement play a broader role in shifting that narrative, where we can say like, hey, through using digital solutions and partnering with procurement, it can be able to better enable teams to focus on impactful tasks rather than manual, repetitive administrative tasks that might be found in the brunt of your day-to-day work, if that applies to your team. And of course, ultimately, purpose-driven employment strategies not only attract new talent, but also reinforces the importance of the work to current staff while making your team more engaged, efficient, and effective. So that brings us to this. So we've talked about, for example, a lot of agencies today are struggling with staff shortages. A lot of the folks on the call with that poll earlier have said that you're also on top of that, you're dealing with complex compliance policies that you're trying to maintain, including complex processes. So how are teams innovating in these times of uncertainty where, for example, like the economy, there seems to be like varying news from different experts every day of like, are we going to be like going to a recession? Is the economy healthy? What's going to happen with like elections this fall? What's going to come in play for like, technology and AI in the future? How are teams thriving today in these times of uncertainty? So if you think about it, we are navigating at a rocky time. We are still coming out of that old supply chain issues that have come from like COVID-19. There's been incredible inflation that's happened ever since 2020. And now a lot of procurement teams are essentially having to handle way more projects with either the same or fewer staffs, all while costs are rising and technology is constantly evolving. So in this landscape, procurement people have had to take on a lot of responsibilities and wear many hats, sometimes even outside of procurement too, or even outside of like going above and beyond, for example, becoming like finance experts, sourcing specialists, and even like compliance experts all in one. Safe to say, for example, even some of the folks that have put in the poll results earlier today, a lot of procurement pretty much feels like project management. You're wearing a lot of hats at the same time. You almost have to be a jack of all trades and master of all, if you will. And the data it truly shows, for example, procurement teams are being pushed further and further. But here's at least one silver line that we've heard from our clients and from these reports, that these shared challenges can actually really help us to drive connect in our communities and better collaborate more effectively if we can share information, share concerns, and just get straight to the point of like how can we make our day-to-day operations better and more effective. And here's one other challenge that we've actually heard. It's something called the fiscal cliff. So what we mean by this is something that we've heard from our agencies in this public procurement report this year. Public agencies essentially received a huge amount of funding from 2021. So, and for example, maybe some agencies on this call today, some teams today, you might have had some varying levels of ability to claim it. For example, you can think of like IIJA infrastructure funding, CARES Act funding, ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan funds. And of course, these are kind of ongoing every year. And so you've seen ever since 2020, there's been a lot of these fundings have been coming in. And now there's obviously, of course, a crucial deadline every year to be able to allocate it and, where like to be able to spend remaining grants. And even that can be quite tricky too, because sometimes some of these grants have like a very tight timeline to be able to approve and spend and push it out and tie it to maybe a bid or an RFP that needs to tie it to a contract award for these grant fundings. And on top of all this, essentially, the states' surplus balances are essentially shrinking. We've been hearing that time and again through a lot of states across the nation. And this essentially gives procurement teams less of a financial safety net. So one of our surveys has even shown that the two biggest challenges that a lot of teams are facing from like a fiscal standpoint and budgeting standpoint essentially is rising costs, especially from the bidding side. You think of like, for example, your construction bids or water department bids for goods and services, and even, for example, unstable supply chains too. Where we've seen, for example, due to 2020, even at the local level, it's kind of shunted out a lot of like small local mom and pop businesses and the like. But by staying more informed and proactive and sharing this information with your peers, it can be able to better have you navigate these financial challenges and secure the resources you need despite these external pressures that's going on. So of course, with that, there is like a silver lining here. There are a lot of, for example, technology solutions out there that a lot of teams have been leveraging today that can support these changes. But of course, with changes, like there's always a catch. There's always like change management issues. Sometimes change can be very scary for a lot of teams. And so if you're ever actually staring down the barrel of, for example, like some of your objectives for like the next fiscal year and change that might be coming on the horizon, here's actually some of the poll results of what we've gathered back from our surveys of how certain teams are feeling today about these times of uncertainty and potential change coming down the horizon. 9.7% feel like they might not be likely to be hesitant to change. 7.8% feel somewhat unlikely to be hesitant. And then most folks are in the middle. 47% are neutral, unsure. And then, for example, 24% feel somewhat likely hesitant, and then a lot of folks feel like very hesitant with all of these changes and the ability for technology to be able to support those changes. But because of that, because of these varying sentiments, it's really important that the whole point of this is to be able to find balance, where balancing risk and innovation will be the key to be able to cross the chasm of this challenge for teams to be able to consider these changes along with their processes down the road. So, as we bridge these gaps, we've talked about bridging the gap for example, like through technology to be able to look at staffing shortages. But now, how can we also bridge the gap through better leveraging your network and leaning into change? So this is really great too, especially in a time where, for example, we're facing times of like maybe smaller teams dealing with higher workloads. How can we make sure that we're leaning on our peers or relying on our peers to be able to find information and innovative ways to be able to bring learnings back to our workplace and back to our Mondays and Fridays and whatnot, to be able to make sure that we're steering our ship in an effective and efficient manner. So the strength of our networks can really help you manage change, especially using the expertise of different people that technology can support but never really replace. Because technology can never really replace like that true hands-on interpersonal human experience and connection, especially with multiple years and decades of experience that some folks bring into their roles. And reaching out to other procurement professionals is a really great way to adapt to these changes. You can learn to use your current resources better and maybe even discover new ways to do it too. So we've actually seen in the last year or so, last few years, there's been a huge increase in interest, and this is really neat, in interagency collaboration, which I think is also very wholesome. But this jump is very stark. It's actually a jump of 265%. For example, in page views, in, for example, one of our resources at EUNA called Community Projects, essentially it's a feature where you can browse other agencies' solicitations that have been run on one of EUNA's platforms, including the ability to get peer insights and piggyback off of like cooperative contracts and the like. So more and more teams, to be more efficient and smart with their time, they're essentially leveraging other networks, both digital and human, to be able to leverage other smarter, faster points of leverage to be able to get better, faster information. So essentially, more and more professionals in our space are essentially realizing that working in isolation isn't that effective anymore. There's just so much going on. The better way, that's not always easy, is collaboration, typically bringing in like better results for the broader community. So if we're talking about this topic or this kind of like idea of co-procurement and new technology, what do we mean by that? So from what we talked about with our clients and through this 2024 State of Public Procurement report, we think co-procurement essentially as an approach where organizations band together to purchase goods and services. So this can look like many different things. This can simply look like pooling your resources together, combining budgets, or like working together with other townships or municipalities in your area or in your state or in your county, standardizing requirements, leveraging collective buying power for the better, faster procurement, uh, even like leveraging better cooperatives and pushing and championing and advocating for like better cooperatives and better policies in your state is a really great way for this. An example of this is super cool. For example, in like from 2020 when COVID happened, for example, the state of New Jersey released an electronic emergency procurement act that allowed, for example, agencies to be able to start doing electronic procurement. And even down, for example, down in Alabama, the state of Alabama has now finally issued into law the ability to actually also allow electronic procurement as well. So now, with like the changing of the times and with like voicing through the community up the chain of command, we're starting to see that there's a bit more budging, if you will, to be able to look for changing ways so that we can meet the needs of procurement today. And here's actually a really neat one too. A part of this co-procurement and new technology too is also leveraging your community. So some of you are already doing this today by being members of NIGP. And if any of you are coming to, for example, the annual conference in Charlotte, North Carolina later on in a few weeks, I know I'll be there, so I'd love to meet you all at the EUNA booth. This is just a really great way to like mingle with your peers, talk together about like shared strategies and even shared concerns or shared challenges and what you're going on in your team. But there's also new communities forming too. So, for example, there's this new one that is built under the leadership of NIGP called AI in public procurement. Really cool, really neat stuff. And it's basically established to provide a more collaborative space for professionals to share their insights and ideas on leveraging AI for procurement optimization and even like managing that risk. So, if you want, you can actually look up, there's a blog on it on NIGP's site. I think you just need to um, Google the role of AI and NIGP leadership, and you should be able to find that kind of blog or that reference page on NIGP. But it's really great. It's really good and promising to see that there's new communities bubbling up today to be able to handle and talk about things that are very much on the fringe of our industry. For example, even something like potentially introducing AI to public procurement and what that could look like. So, with these tools to empower members to navigate AI with confidence, this community-driven approach essentially will help you and your team hopefully, maintain competitiveness and effectiveness and stay up to date, but also just make more informed decisions while understanding the risk and rewards of these different technology advancements like AI. Because that is a whole new green pastures that we're all going together, inching slowly day by day, month by month, year by year, to see how that might unfold in the space of public sector in general and in government. So with that, that brings us to one of our third out of four pillars of what we want to cover today, and that's like moving towards realizing strategic incomes, or not income, sorry, outcomes. So many organizations have been stuck or experiencing challenges in reacting to changes instead of being able to, plan ahead. But that's been shifting now as networks have been expanding, just like how we're all getting together at NIGP later in the month. Even greater demand for transparency and proof of results growing from public sector agencies. So essentially, connecting your current processes to strategic outcomes relies on network powered procurement, which is like a new term that we've been hearing more and more from some folks in the industry. And now we've been talking about this through the entire time, but by leveraging networks, both digital and personal. But by setting up a support system for example, like the entire gambit of your shop, from supply chains to knowledge sharing and collaboration, essentially will help your team better manage the ship a lot more tightly and a lot more efficiently. But these kind of innovations and interconnectivity can really help your team find new ways to benefit from the community and from insights to make a better positive impact through your procurement initiatives. So, for an example of this, uh, technology can be used as a really great way to be able to find easier ways to make it very clear to advertise to your community that's saying like, hey, we want to align this bid, this ITB or this IFB or this RFP to goals in our community. We're only going to, for example, depending on your jurisdiction or project or funding, you may just focus on like supplier diversity, sustainability, or local purchasing. And there's also like a network effect and technology solutions to be able to help capture and help broadcast that as you're engaging with procurement to meet those initiatives. So with these, there's these key priorities that have been coming out that we've been hearing time and again in the last few years, and especially in this past year in public procurement. So some of these key priorities has been, supplier diversity, sustainability, and local purchasing. So our survey data essentially shows that over half of public procurement teams are working on like a combination of these three programs. 23% have some kind of supplier diversity program either like in play or coming out in the near future. 5.8 or 6% are focused on sustainability, and then almost 30% or 29% are working on both of the first two. And moreover, most organizations with these programs have been running them for over 5 years. But of course, 76% of respondents said it's either somewhat or very important to spend money with these local vendors. So we can see that through these changing times, there's a greater need to be able to not only manage and deliver on procurement initiatives effectively and on time with a tighter budget and staffing, but also to be able to make sure that we're meeting these initiatives too. So how can we do that when we have so many things pulling us in so many different directions? From our reports, one of the ways, for example, is being able to explore a whole bunch of different recommendations from our folks in our community to be able to bridge that gap and provide different roads and alternatives to success in procurement. So it doesn't just need to be like a one-way, straightforward answer. Your mileage may vary, and of course, for example, a lot of these solutions and recommendations, that you'll see in the next few slides, really just depend on, for example, like your shop today back in your team. But of course, some of these, for example, are solutions or examples of challenges that we've seen being faced in the last year in public procurement. Where, for example, the first one we can talk about is challenge-based procurement. So you can think of this as more of like a kind of like a reactive approach, if you will, that a lot of teams sometimes just like are forced to do just because of the nature of the volume of work. But this method more so focuses on addressing specific challenges rather than dictating how they should be solved. So an example of this could be a local government needs to cool down its city streets in the summer, and then suppliers can propose solutions such as green space and shade along streets or even paving materials that don't, hold heat like traditional asphalt does. And then there's outcome-based contracting, where this approach is more so about like seeing results, where examples could be a local government decides first, more green space and shade along a city streets is the solution for its challenge. However, water conservation is one of the sustainability goals. So in results, to be able to address both of those, the supplier solution should be able to include both the number of drought-resistant plants and be able to capture and filter gallons of X amount of gallons of storm runoff. So this is making it inverse. So making sure that we're thinking first through our organization, what is our broader initiatives and priorities in our community that we want to serve, and how can that be reflected through procurement? Additionally, we can also bring in more value with networks. So, now like we can talk about leveraging more so, we've talked about digital networks and things like that, but we can also leverage our buyer networks as well. So collaborating with procurement peers essentially allows you to learn from their experiences, avoid common mistakes, and even achieve your strategic goals potentially more efficiently too. Supplier networks are equally crucial. Access to a broader variety of suppliers can help you find the best fit for your project needs, while also increasing competition, fostering innovation, and enhancing efficiency. So, using network powered tools allows you to essentially seamlessly engage these suppliers that meet specific criteria, such as local businesses, ensuring your procurement strategies align with your regional economic goals. So, there's obviously, of course, solutions out there to be able to make this a bit more easier for y'all. And I'll leave this screen for folks to read here. I'll just give me a moment. I'm just going to have a glass of water. But as said on this tip on the screen here, with how can we demonstrate results while increasing transparency and lightening administrative load? It could make it a lot easier to showcase procurement's value by generating visually appealing reports that highlight things like cost avoidance, hard dollar savings, and showcasing these statistics to the public can essentially boost trust and prove that you're spending tax dollars wisely. So how can we demonstrate these results, but also make so that it's very enticing and very easy for other members of the community to be able to see what results that you're bringing into the community, rather than like maybe like a dry report or things like that. So proving results to stakeholders like city council or the public, or even using those results with your team for improvements essentially is key. And potentially, the right software can help you act on those strategic goals, whether it's like local purchasing metrics or broader targets like affordable housing. With these tools, you can essentially create reports that show how your procurement strategies work and identify areas of improvement. So, for example, these tools can also help you make better decisions with data, ensuring efficient resource use and better results. And the whole point of this is just to make it simple. and to make it so that we can improve procurement's value by generating visually appealing reports that highlight cost savings and other key metrics. So that's finally, now we're moving on to the final piece of some of the top key trends that we've garnered from our report this year. And that's just on the topic of community and network again. So communities thrive when people work together, building bridges of connection. That's essentially the essence of network powered procurement. And so, procurement professionals, it allows our ability to be able to share insights, best practices, resources, and strategies to make processes smoother and essentially outcomes better, especially in these times of uncertainty. So we know that procurement teams are already leveraging networks to achieve more. So a lot of what I'm talking about today, perhaps some or a lot of you on this call today are already doing a lot of what we've been mentioning. So 54% of our respondents from our surveys this year have mentioned that they are already leveraging the power of their networks for better outcomes. And then 78% of respondents rate interagency collaboration as useful or very useful, which really ties into the first poll too. One big push that we've been hearing and seeing from a lot of teams is they want to be able to make it easy and seamless for procurement to not be a bottleneck and make it easier for them to work with other departments, especially because we want to make sure that uh, projects that flow down the pipeline, for example, from another department into procurement or purchasing or finance, is as smooth as possible, and so that we can push it out to the other side of like an awarded bid or awarded solicitation and contract as soon as possible. So we already know a lot of procurement professionals recognize the value of peer collaboration and work like together very closely with their other peers, either on like a monthly or weekly basis, with even 79% of respondents, again, as you can see on our screen, 78% rating interagency collaboration as like very useful. And what's most interesting is essentially they find the most value in actually cooperative and piggyback contracts too. So it's not just having to like make it easier to work with your other departments and staff, but it could also mean leveraging other pre-approved contracts or cooperatives in your area or in your county or at your local state to be able to just make it a lot easier to, like, for example, leverage different templates and solutions or like leverage piggyback contracts to make it so that you can make the competitive buying process a lot more easier and efficient for your teams. But now, with these metrics in mind, we can discuss next essentially, how and why creating and nurturing these connections with both peers and suppliers could be a very valuable part of public procurement in these times of uncertainty. So with that, there are actually now better and faster ways to interact with suppliers now. So of course, if some of the folks on the call, you might have been using solutions today, like maybe DemandStar, IronWave, or like Bonfire, or now like under like an umbrella of products. But there are now even more ways to be able to facilitate and expand your network. And this doesn't just include like other networks or artifacts or like procurement documents, but also like with your broader team and suppliers too. So like answering supplier questions publicly, these can be examples, answering supplier questions publicly to enhance transparency, or for example, even like having public questions answered platforms used by agencies saves teams thousands of minutes due to better supplier communication, where you don't need to worry about doing that now in, for example, like a phone call with a vendor or emails back and forth with vendors too, or even vendors coming in directly to your office in person. So with that, there's cooperative purchasing reduces costs as well. So our survey data shows that cooperative contracts are the most valuable collaborative resource and the second most common buying vehicle for good reason. So a study done in the Netherlands found that co-procurement significantly reduced transportation and purchasing costs, where from our survey, 7.5% found that like they were able to achieve lower purchasing costs due to co-procurement and the cooperative contracts, as an example, and 55% lower transportation costs using co-procurement from the study found in the Netherlands. So this is just a really great reminder as a best practice to be able to see, like, as much as you can, how can we leverage your community or even like your digital technologies to be able to tap into cooperative contracts and even vouch for more cooperative contracts that you can leverage in your communities and your local townships, municipalities, agencies, and more. And with that, we've kind of like covered a lot of grounds here. And where this comes all together is really going into something called like full cycle procurement. So what do we mean by that, by full cycle procurement? Unfortunately, for the teams who might be looking at my screen today, it's not going to be as, like the steering, the Ferris wheel on my screen here. But really, full cycle procurement is looking at the whole gambit of your operations very holistically. So now what we can say on the bright side is now where we're at in 2024 and beyond, there's now digital solutions purpose-built to essentially cover the entire gambit of procurement from end to end. Where we know, for example, there's sourcing platforms like, for example, Bonfire, where we know that this is the process and the activity of going out to market to source something formally, either through, for example, maybe an RFQ, in IFB, ITB, and RFP, essentially finding goods or services, getting best value procurement, and comparing and getting competitive procurement between and evaluating between suppliers. Additionally, there's contracting solutions where, for example, after award, we're managing contracts, contract templates, work with other stakeholders through the lifecycle of a contract, make sure performance and renewals are done on time. And you have like the invoicing. Some folks do this by a combination of, for example, something offline, or maybe it's tagged through an ERP system or a financial system through like a purchasing requisition and a closed ticket. And of course, we have like this other interesting thing too, which has been a really great new partnership with EUNA Solutions. There's now, for example, like e-marketplace solutions. So for example, at EUNA, in the past year, we've now partnered with Equal Level, which essentially is a marketplace solution, very innovative ways to be able to make it a lot easier for your teams and your buyers to be able to do direct marketplace solutions. Where now the problem there was before, a lot of teams when they had to buy something, especially when it's just like a direct marketplace buy, for example, something like we're looking to buy a city or township tens of thousands of pens for the office for the next 5 years. There might be a budget threshold. There might be, for example, maybe they need to have pre-approved suppliers that they need to shop from, or pre-approved contracts they need to work off of. There typically ends up being a lot of documentation that needs to be done. And also sometimes a lot of staff are having to go ahead and shop offline directly. But now there's integrated solutions where you can actually do all the shopping in one place, where you can have your pre-saved, suppliers and contracts and policies on one place, where it's much more of a guided experience, decreasing that manual legwork and also increasing compliance spend through marketplace solutions. But all this to say, essentially, encompassing is now we can safely say that as we go into 2024 and 2025, we've heard a lot of optimism from a lot of teams saying that what, in these uncertain times, at least there are a lot of digital solutions out there that can augment our processes either by bits or even completely from end to end. So I actually thought, like, as we come close to the end of our presentation here, I actually thought I'd leave the slide here as these are actually just different challenges and recommendations that we've actually heard from other clients as well who have responded to our survey this year. So for example, we can see from our slides here, from challenges, for example, rising costs and goods and services, we've heard some of our clients recommend that like one way you could approach this is improving competition with access to, using technology to access more qualified suppliers and different regions served, so you can find savings. Supply chain worries, you can also collaborate with other agencies to negotiate better deals and ensure a more reliable supply chain. Fear of leveraging AI, again, gaining a better understanding through, for example, that community I mentioned earlier, where now there's AI in public procurement headed by NIGP leadership and really, getting into those communities to stay up to date. And of course, workforce efficiency and capacity, using collaborative technology to be able to augment that. Supplier engagement and relationship management, very similar in that sense as well. And of course, the need to accomplish strategic initiatives, which can be done through diversity, sustainability, and even like local purchasing initiatives with supplier networks. So then these are just some suggested solutions we've gathered from our surveys on how teams today are, taking their approach to some of these issues today. And I thought actually we kind of come as we had come to a close here, as we've kind of taken this presentation to talk about our findings from our surveys and our 2024 State of Public Procurement Report. But I thought I'd actually end here with another poll here, just to survey the folks on the call. And what we want to know is, what challenges are you looking forward to tackling in the coming year? What are your biggest challenges that you're really excited for, like you're really focusing on this year, especially after this presentation and going into next fiscal year? Is it rising costs of goods and services, supply chain worries, fear of leveraging AI, workforce efficiency and capacity, supplier engagement and relationship management, or even like the need to increase diversity and sustainability through procurement? So with that said, I'll leave Jeff to facilitate these polls. We'll go to the results, and then we'll deeper from there. And we just have a few slides left, and we'll be at the end.
The poll has been launched, and a little bit more than 50% have already responded. So we'll take another 15 seconds. Ten more seconds. And we are about to close the poll. The exact same number of people have participated as last time. And here are the results. What you interested in knowing, Jimmy?
I'd actually love to hear what the top three are.
Top three are workforce efficiency and capacity, 50%
Wow.
was that one. Again, this was multiple choice, 50%. And 30% chose rising cost of goods and services, followed by 27% supplier engagement and relationship management.
Hmm. Wow, thank you for sharing that, Jeff, and thanks everyone for filling those poll results. And what's interesting about those three leading results is they're all actually intertied as well. So even for example, we're seeing an increase in projects, increase in costs on the supplier side for, like, for example, goods and services you might be buying directly or through bids and RFQs and whatnot. At the same time, you're trying to make sure that you're better engaging suppliers and more suppliers, and also making sure you're keeping a relationship with them. So I think this really dives into the theme of like what we've been feeling today and what we've been feeling the last like few years or so, where, I feel like for a lot of teams, like they feel like the candle is being burned from like both ends, or they're being pulled in a whole bunch of different directions. And hopefully, as we've gathered today, if you are feeling these challenges, you are not alone. A lot of your peers are also feeling this as well. And hopefully, for example, for any of the folks on this webinar today, if you're actually coming into like the NIGP show in person in Charlotte in a few weeks, hopefully you'll be able to like mix and mingle with like other folks either on the virtual side or even in person, to be able to like better come together and see like how other teams like on like the ground, boots on the ground, how they're basically challenging these, addressing these challenges that you're facing. But for folks on the call here, if you are actually interested in actually seeing and downloading the report yourself, you can actually download it for free. And you actually download it here by opening up your phone and like scanning this QR code. And from there, you'll just be able to like put in your name, and then you'll be able to like get and download this report for free. So with that said, that brings us to the end of the webinar again. Today's topic was about the 2024 State of Public Procurement Report by EUNA Solutions, collaborating to innovate, finding key trends for public procurement this year. So we hope that this webinar today has either been very validating and very assuring with some of the challenges and priorities that you're going through today. And hopefully you'll be able to find something useful with, for example, some of the findings in this report, and even, for example, the show at NIGP in a few weeks, and even from this report that you can download right here from the screen. But again, with that said, my name is Jimmy from EUNA Solutions. Very grateful for folks who are tuning in today. I'll leave this on screen for anyone who to download the report. But if anyone's actually going to the show, the NIGP Annual Forum in person at Charlotte, happy to meet you all there. I'm going to be at the booth at for EUNA Solutions. And yeah, I think we can wrap it there. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you, Jimmy. We didn't see any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we're just getting a lot of thank yous currently in the chat. So with that, I'll also say thank you to you, Jimmy, and everyone for being here today. Please take some time to fill out the evaluation. And once again, the recording of this webinar will be sent out later this afternoon or early tomorrow. Make it a great day, everybody.